everybody. Welcome to another edition of the GD Report. I am G.
And I am D.
So we got a pretty good show planned out for you today. Had a pretty good pregame tailgate production meeting. So we're just going to jump right into it. Our first topic is we're bringing back and I just love saying this, ex-President Trump. He's in the news. D, why don't you tell us what's going on with him?
Well, great to see everybody, first of all. And happy Saturday. It's a Saturday when we recorded this. But former President Trump is back in the news. And, sometimes I think that some of these things he does are just stunts to get himself back in the news because he misses being the topic of everyone's conversation. But obviously, Alan Weisselberg was indicted by the grand jury in New York. His chief financial officer of the Trump companies, Trump organization. But now Mr. Trump has filed a lawsuit against Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for suspending his accounts and claiming a violation of free speech. He wants to file them as a class action suit as well, so that I'm sure all his minions who have had their accounts shut down for saying illegal, inappropriate, or just flat out patently false ideas can join in with the lawsuit. But a couple things about it. Legal scholars have looked at the suit, and it's legally suspect from a standpoint that he can't really prove a real injury, from a standpoint that the First Amendment does not apply to private corporations in the way that he's trying to apply it.
Right.
They have a right on their platform to control the content and to be able to monitor what content is. They own the content. People forget when they sign up for virtually any software, but specifically internet platforms such as social media, that little checkbox that everybody just checks and doesn't really read, the user agreement and the privacy policies and all that. You're basically waiving any rights that you have.
Right.
And just turning those over to the company. I mean, there can be some legal debates about that, but it's also factually incorrect on a lot of different ways. The biggest takeaway from this lawsuit is that I don't think Mr. Trump anticipated the fact that because he's filed this lawsuit, if it goes forward, he will be required to sit for a deposition under oath from the attorneys it could be all three entities could require a separate deposition. So I can't fathom him at this stage in his life, with all the things he's done in the last 6 years, wanting to sit for another deposition.
Yeah, well, so that opens him up to what he was doing on January 6th, right?
What's that?
So this lawsuit, they're going to be able to delve into the insurrection, and he'll be under oath. And
and those questions, the Howard Baker questions we've talked about before. What did the president know, and when did he know it? Those will come up. What was the president doing? Nobody's ever really been able to get a straight answer on when the insurrection was happening. What was he doing? We know Kevin McCarthy called him and told him to call people off. And that's where he made his famous quote of, well, Kevin, I guess these people care more about the election than you do.
So do you think first of all, if this lawsuit goes forward, the current configuration of the Supreme Court, it's likely to be settled in Trump's favor if the current configuration stays as is, unless you get a John Roberts and a Neil Gorsuch to jump over with.
I don't know. This is the kind of thing. This is the spigot that the right wing has opened that they don't always anticipate. Okay, because I think it could be, if it got to the Supreme Court, whether it was a valid case or not, I think it could end up being 9-0 against Trump. And here's why. They've put all these corporatist jurists on the bench, and they're definitely social warriors, but they're also pretty strong on the side of private business, right?
Right.
And so think about it. If Facebook and these companies make a compelling case that, hey, we're a private business, we're a corporation, we shouldn't be able to be sued in this way. Now, Alito and Thomas have made some pretty strong statements about, whether Sullivan versus New York Times should be reviewed now because of social media. But I think from a pure standpoint of whether his free speech rights were violated by them controlling their own platform, there could be a pretty solid case for a private business being able to run how they want to, because typically they say that kind of stuff, about the private company. Don't the Republicans always want to argue that a private company shouldn't have to do what they don't want to do?
Right. Well, it wouldn't be 9-0, would it? It'd be at least 7-2, because haven't a couple of SCOTUS come out already in favor of Trump in this suit, sort of?
I don't know on the particular merits of this case that they have. I mean, Alito and Thomas have indicated that they think that Sullivan versus New York Times should be reviewed, but I don't know that this would necessarily fall under that, because he would have to prove that he's been injured, and he'd have to prove that he's been slandered, he's been libeled, and the number one defense against all those from my business law classes is truth.
Right.
It's like, don't tell me what they said about you that is not true.
Right.
And the burden's on him to prove that at that point. So it'll be interesting, but I think, number one, it's a fundraising ploy, because he has sent out a ton of fundraising emails about it.
Right.
And so it's one more way for him to put money in his pockets, and to be able to try to fund his legal defense team.
Right.
Through his lawsuits, and people that are giving money to him at this stage, you just go, what in the world?
Yeah.
I compare it. The closest thing I've seen to this is back in the 70s and 80s, when people used to give money to Oral Roberts and Jim Baker and Jimmy Swaggart, and those little old ladies would be on Social Security checks that couldn't pay their rent, but they'd be sending money to Jimmy Swaggart, or
right, because they were doing God's work.
Yeah, and it's almost the same kind of fealty that they show to Trump.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, people are crazy. So,
absolutely.
and we'll have to watch this suit as it goes forward, and just see. It might be some deflection, because wasn't Trump in the news with some? I can't remember exactly, but wasn't there some? Didn't he get a setback or something? And maybe I'm thinking wrong, but. I just thought that maybe this was, that's his MO. Anything bad comes out, he usually tries to do something to deflect.
Yeah, and project what he's done onto somebody else.
Right.
We had the Weisselberg indictment.
Oh yeah, that was it.
And
the Trump organization.
I mentioned that earlier. And the funny thing about that suit about that indictment and further investigation is, they're looking at employee perks that were provided, and Trump, in a couple of his rallies, has basically confirmed that he did it.
Oh yeah.
Why are they investigating people so we let them stay at an apartment because it was too far, a company-owned apartment because it's too far for them to stay, and we let them, we help pay for their grandkids' private school. What's so wrong with that? Well, it's called compensation.
Yeah, I know. So, when I came to Denver, the company that brought me up, they put me up in a hotel for a month while I looked for a house. And at the end of the year, I got a 1099 for the hotel stay. So,
well, and what's interesting about that continued investigation is, the next step up from this is going to be, I believe it's going to be Trump's children, because how much did they pay for the lifestyle of Don Jr., Eric, and Ivanka through the Trump organization without paying taxes on it?
Yeah. My guess is a lot.
I would guess a whole heck of a lot, probably more than Alan Weisselberg.
Right.
So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on that and see what's happening. So I think we're going to go a little bit south of DC now, aren't we?
Yeah. So speaking of Mr. Trump, in 2017, there was a Unite the Right rally where Mr. Trump famously said there were good people on both sides, there was a woman killed in the Unite the Right rally when a right-wing zealot drove his car through the crowd and killed her.
Now was that, I don't know if I heard you correct. Was that Unite the Right or Unite the White?
Yeah, well, you could the two terms in this case are interchangeable because it was all white people that were on the right side of the rally.
Yeah, and you had the night before the violence took place, you had the white supremacists marching through the park with tiki torches, chanting, "The Jews will not replace us."
Right. And it was all over. The whole thing started over two statues, one in particular, a statue of General Robert E. Lee on a horse. And the city wanted to remove those statues. And ultimately, they were sued and to try and keep them in place. The suit went all the way to the Virginia State Supreme Court, which ruled in April that the city could take them down. And so I believe it was yesterday, those statues did come down. And they came down fairly peacefully, as far as I know. Have you seen anything to the contrary?
I've not seen anything to the contrary.
So
on that. So yeah, it's interesting that interesting time that we live in on that. Now, a couple things about the statue. You know, there's been a lot of debate back and forth from people on the right that say, well, this is just more cancel culture. I love that term.
right.
I think a more appropriate term is consequence culture. But, you know, there are consequences for your actions and for the things that are taken. But we have this statue of the traitor, Robert E. Lee. And people say, well, on the right, they say, if you take this statues down, you're erasing history.
Right.
You're trying to get rid of historical facts, which, first of all, unless you burn books, which tends to be something of an authoritarian side of things, it's really hard to erase history.
Right.
You know, or unless you say, I don't know, pass laws saying what teachers can and can't teach.
Right.
But that's going on in state legislatures all across the country. But, you know, they say this statue is a historical statue and it should be taken down. But I like to remind people that most of these statues in the South were not erected immediately after the Civil War. This one, in fact, was I believe it was opened in 1924.
Yeah.
So some 60
80.
odd years after the Civil War was over,
Right.
or almost over, where the statue was erected. And they were not erected as, hey, let's remember this valiant history. That's what they want to say now. They were erected as markers and reminders to African Americans of who was still in charge in the South.
Right. Yep, absolutely. And so now they, when when Black Americans want to teach critical race theory, those same people that are complaining about taking down the statues say, "Oh no, we can't teach that. That's bad. That's going to make white kids feel bad about their heritage." Well,
which again, I'll challenge anybody. I don't know anybody really in schools, actually in public schools, actually teaching critical race theory.
Right.
But they want to make it all encompassing to where if you talk about the racist beginnings and foundations of our country, both against African Americans, slaves, and against indigenous people as well, that suddenly that's this big theory of making everybody feel bad instead of saying, hey, we're number one. We're the best country in the world. We've never done anything wrong. You know, our heroes have always been cowboys, just on and on and on, where, to me, Germany is a great example of this from a standpoint that they don't have statues in Germany of Adolf Hitler.
Right.
They don't have statues of Himmler or of Goring or any of the other Nazi leaders. They don't have statues of them. Why? Because they were traitors to their country. They were villainous people. They fought for atrocious ideals. And like it or not, whether people in the South like it or not, the people fighting on the Confederate side were fighting for atrocious ideas.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's just the thought of enslaving a population is, it's atrocious. I mean, what in anybody's mind would make you think that you're better than somebody? And this is how they think to this day, that you're better than somebody just because you were born with a different skin color. I mean, it's crazy.
And unfortunately, back then and even now, it gets wrapped in the guile of religion in a lot of cases.
Yep.
And there's just this superiority complex that they have. And, we shouldn't have statues of these folks in our parks or in anywhere. They were insurrectionists against our country. And we should wipe this stuff out. And if somebody hear me say that, they're going to say, "Oh, he's saying erase history." I'm not saying erase history. You can read all about it you want to, but we shouldn't have anything that glamorizes it and glamorizes what happened. And I'm glad to see that statue of the traitor Robert E. Lee gone. And I would love to see anything that exalts him or tries to give him a higher place than he deserves in our history should be taken away.
Right. Well, and speaking of that, one of my favorite places to visit when I go to DC is Arlington National Cemetery, and it's built on grounds where Lee lived, and there's a movement afoot. So the house that's there that started the cemetery is named the Leecustis Mansion because Robert E. Lee was married to Martha Custis, who was George Washington's granddaughter. And there's a movement to rename it Arlington House and, kind of do away with, naming it after Robert E. Lee because he was a traitor. And I've maintained that, you go through the South, there's buildings named after these people. So I went to John B. Hood, who was a Confederate general. I went to John B. Hood Junior High in Dallas, Texas, and it's still there to this day. And, I maintain that had we dealt with these traitors like other countries deal with their traitors, which is execute them, we wouldn't be having the problems that we have today. I mean, it would be a whole different story. Yeah,
absolutely. And if that's tough for people to swallow, that's just too bad. I mean, these are people that took up arms against their own country. And I liken them to the same people as January 6th too. People that took up weapons against their own capital and marched a Confederate flag through the halls of our Congress. And I agree with you. In Tennessee, there's a big debate because in the state capitol in Tennessee, they have a bust of Nathaniel Bedford Forrest, who was a Confederate general and also the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan.
Right.
And they, the historical commission who's in charge of the statues in the Capitol finally voted this year to get rid of that bust. And you know what they did?
What?
They fired the historical commission and replaced them. So you got to ask yourself, why do they hold on to this?
Yeah. Yeah. Growing up in the South, I really can't answer that, except I can tell you my mother was a fervent believer that at some point, and there's songs about it. Charlie Daniels had the hit song about the South is going to rise again. And she firmly believed that at some point, the ideals of the South, where, whites were the supreme and, their rule was over everything, that would take place across the country. And, to some extent, she's correct because the Republican Party, now you can point to Senator Scott and a few others, but pretty much it's a whites only party. And they're ruling the country. Mitch McConnell has the country by the throat, and the country pretty much, does what Mitch McConnell says because he controls the votes in the Senate, even now when he's in the minority.
Yeah.
So that's why they do it. It's to hold on to power.
Yeah. It's all about absolute power and control.
Yep.
All right. Dark topics.
Yeah.
I think are we staying in Tennessee?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So trying to think, I think she is the senior senator now. It's hard for me. There's so many turnover in the Senate sometimes to keep junior and senior senators, but I think she was the junior senator under Alexander, but he was replaced last year. He didn't run for re-election. So the senior senator from Tennessee, Marsha Blackburn, came out this week and said that in an authoritarian Marxist socialist, where they like to lump a lot of things together, society, that artists like Taylor Swift would be the first people to be in trouble because the Marxists would not allow her to sing the songs that she sings or even perform on stage. And so all this is rooted from the fact that in the I believe it was 2018 election when Blackburn ran for Senate, Taylor Swift came out against her and campaigned for her opponent.
Right.
And said that Tennessee deserved better than Marsha Blackburn's right-wing policies. And so we talked about this on the pregame tailgate, but I'm pretty sure, and I didn't do the research on this, shame on me, but I'm pretty sure Taylor Swift's had quite a few concerts in Norway and Sweden and a lot of socialist countries.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, you look around and, there's a lot of socialist countries and, they seem to be thriving. And, I've traveled to some of them and, I've talked to people, I like to talk politics and, everywhere you go, there's politics, no matter what country you're in. And everywhere I've been, people are free to say what they want about the government. And, now I haven't been to Myanmar, so, and I've yet to go to China. So, I don't know how they talk in those countries, but for the most part, Australia, New Zealand, Sweden, Norway, those countries always come up on the top of the list for happiest countries in the world. You see, top bands like Taylor Swift, U2, they're going to those countries and playing, sold out venues, and they don't seem to have a problem. So I think this is another scare tactic from Marsha Blackburn.
Well, they always want to lump like socialism as this one big term, and they don't recognize that there's definitely autocratic socialism and there's democratic socialism.
Yeah.
And you look at the countries you're talking about in Northern Europe, those are democratic socialist countries where the people are still in power. Sure, there's dictatorships. There's like Myanmar, there's South American dictatorships that have had experiments with socialism that have gone awry, but it's a whole different thing than what we're talking about here. And again, in my mind, it's right-wing projection of the authoritarian tendencies that they're trying to pass and push through, that they're projecting onto socialism, because those are the kinds of things they're talking about, wanting to control and say who gets to perform and who doesn't.
Right.
And I think they get butthurt, quite frankly, when they have an inauguration for somebody like a Joe Biden, or in a better example is probably Barack Obama, because that was pre-COVID, and you get people like Bono from U2 and Bruce Springsteen and Pete Seeger and Diana Ross and Smokey Robinson, and the biggest stars in the world performing for that. And then you do a Trump inauguration and you get Lee Greenwood and the Oak Ridge Boys, and just a really fine niche of artists who either prescribe to the same political views or just aren't as popular anymore.
Right.
Because the biggest stars are going to be more inclusive and be more about diversity.
Right. Yeah. And if people can't see that the world is changing, that's the thing about the Republican Party today, is the world's changing and the Republican Party's not. Part of it, I think, is trying to, hello, Liz Cheney. But, the fact that Trump maintains a hold on the party is just shows you how far, mired in, and unchanging the party is. Mired in the past is what I was looking for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Speaking about mired in the past, that takes us to our final topic, which is talking about the way politics has changed and the way to your point, the way the Republican Party, even though they're not changing with the times, they're definitely changing in their attitude of how they govern, or I should say how they choose not to govern.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like we said earlier, it's no secret that the most powerful man in America is Mitch McConnell. And he maintains a grip on the Senate, even though he's in the minority party. And the Democrats, Chuck Schumer in particular, they don't seem, it seems like they've in the past they've been this party of, we're nice and we don't have any bulldogs, LBJ notwithstanding. But we just want to help people and do the right thing and blah blah blah, right? Where the Republicans are like Al Davis from the Raiders, just win, baby. And politics has changed, and Democrats like me are saying, hey, we need to embrace some of that Al Davis and Republican mentality, and we need some wins. It's not enough to go up there and say we fought for you. To heck with that. Let's start winning.
Yeah, I think there a lot of Democrats, and particularly the ones who've been around the Senate for a long time, and I think the Senate gets removed sometimes from the process from the standpoint that they only have to run every 6 years. Right. And so the members of the House of Representatives are running every 2 years. So their feet are to the fire a lot quicker. And it's what have you done for me lately? Right. A lot more with the House than it is with the Senate. But I think a lot of the Senate Democrats are living in a world where they still think there's going to be collegial comity and we're going to have this reverence for each party. And we're going to, Joe Manchin's talking about bipartisanship like this is, Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, having whiskeys at night and top of the morning to you, Mr. President, that kind of thing. But when you're dealing with like people like Ted Cancun and Tom Cotton and all these senators, Rand Paul, who have no intention of passing anything.
Yep.
Okay. The goal is to gum it up.
Yep.
And that's why you've seen the filibuster used more since Mitch McConnell's been either majority or minority leader. The filibuster has been used as a shotgun instead of a scalpel. And there's not been any major. I mean, the COVID relief bill that was passed under reconciliation was the first big piece of legislation that was passed since the tax cut of like 2017. Right.
Yep.
And so you see, they just want to basically, and this is my opinion, but I feel like the Republican Party's philosophy today is let's run the four corners offense in basketball. Let's run out the clock on democracy. And if we can install all the judges we want, we can pass gerrymandered laws so that we stay in power. We keep the electoral college so that there's ways for us to be able to manipulate that. And then we have state legislatures now that can, in a lot of states, overturn election results. We stay in power forever.
Right.
And so Democrats are going to have to ask themselves, at what point, do you wait on Lucy to pull the football back from Charlie Brown again?
Right.
Or do you say, by God, we're going to get some stuff done that's going to save democracy? Because people are going to say it's hyperbolic, but democracy is what's at stake right now.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
if I vote in Oklahoma or you vote in Colorado, and then the opposing party is in power in state legislature and they don't like the results, they can just overturn it.
Yeah,
they can just say there's voter fraud in Oklahoma County. Therefore, and we talked earlier on the pregame tailgate about some friends of ours we have that are a little bit more removed from politics than we are.
Yep.
And they don't necessarily watch it that close. They don't pay attention. They get disgusted with both parties. But that's really what the right wing wants. They want more people to tune out.
Yep.
We want more people to be disgusted and say politics doesn't make a difference. But I've got some friends in Oklahoma, and you probably have some in Colorado too. You guys were ahead of us, but I've got some friends in Oklahoma who are very active in the medical marijuana field.
Yep.
Right. And very passionate about that issue. And that's really the only issue they're passionate about. They don't really think about other things. And now that we've passed the medical marijuana laws in Oklahoma, they think that's great. But what happens when we have a state referendum like that and it passes, gets enough votes to pass, but then the Republican state legislature comes in and goes, yeah, we don't think so. We think there's some irregularities in Oklahoma County and Tulsa County, so we're going to throw those out. Oh, it didn't pass. Sorry, guys. And that's the kind of stuff that can happen. It's not just about candidates. It can be about issues.
Yep. Yeah. And so what's the difference between, Oklahoma County and Myanmar, if that becomes the case? There's not, except that for now, they're not shooting people in the head because you're holding the sign against the government.
Right.
For now.
Right.
But once you start down that, I hate to use the term, that slippery slope, but it applies. Once you start down that slippery slope, who knows where you're going to end up? And, right now there's people calling, and it gets fewer and fewer as things go along, but we've got people calling for a Myanmar style coup to put Trump back in power. Well, I mean, and then in the same breath, they're condemning what's going on over there. They're talking about how bad it is. Well, you can't really have it both ways, folks. I mean, and this in the pregame tailgate, this all started with, I was talking to a coworker, and he was complaining about, I just don't like what's going on right now. Well, what do you not like? Okay, I understand gas is a little expensive. And that may be an issue you want to talk about, but I mean, let's face it, folks, oil is on the way out. It may be 50 and maybe 100 years, but it's
I was saying, nobody wants to hear it, but gas was probably too cheap.
Yeah. And so, the Texas oil men will tell you, for a prosperous economy, now this is changing as well as we switch away from fossil fuels. But for a prosperous economy, you need oil to be about $75 a barrel, which is about where it is right now. So, I mean, do I like the fact that gas is over $3 a gallon? No. But, you change your routine up a little bit. You become a little more judicious about where you're driving and what you're doing, and, you make it work. I do think if Mr. Biden is going to get reelected, and I do think he will run, I think he's going to have to do something about the gas prices, because people fixate on one issue, like you were saying, medical marijuana, abortion. There are other issues that people jump on, but if gas is over $4 a gallon, it's going to impact the way people vote, and they're going to vote against his opponent if that's the case.
Sure. I agree. But it goes back to the fact that, Texas Congressman Chip Roy gave a speech last week to some private donors, and the audio got leaked out. And he said, our main goal is to block everything and to try to get to December of 2022.
Yep.
That's our goal. And so that's what Democrats have to face. You do not have a willing partner that's willing to work with you. Even this bipartisan deal that they supposedly negotiated.
Yeah.
I think the big mistake with that deal is when they agreed to that deal, they should have had it ready to go to the floor that day.
Well, doesn't that include an 80 cent gas tax?
There's some stuff in there that I don't know that I think here's what happened. I think they agreed to this big framework, and now they have their staffers trying to write the bill, and who knows what's going to go in it. And That's the problem, though. You're giving Mitch McConnell, Moscow Mitch, plenty of time to be able to get votes against it and whip against it. Well, and you shouldn't announce anything, in my view. Now, again, I'm not the president, but in my view, I'm not announcing anything till I have the bill ready to go to the floor.
Right. Well, and I've heard Bernie Sanders say that that's a non-starter for him. An 80 cent gas tax. You know, get,
Yeah.
I don't know what it is in Oklahoma. I know it's still under $3 in North Carolina. But here in Colorado, the cheapest I've seen it is about $3.25. And
Yep.
so you add an 80-cent gas tax. Now you're right at $4 a gallon. And people are gonna blame the Democrats. They're gonna say, you shove this down our throat, gas went to $4 a gallon and blah, blah, blah. And that's gonna be hard to overcome in 2022 and 2024. So if that's in the bill, they need to get it out.
Absolutely agree. All right, that takes us to the end of today's session. Everybody stay safe out there. We've got some spiking up of the Delta variant of COVID. So please take precautions, be safe, get the vaccine. If you haven't gotten the vaccine, please get it, because that's what 99% of the folks having to go to the hospital for treatment and get on ventilators are people who have not been vaccinated.
Yep. Absolutely. All right, folks, we'll see you on the next one. Have a good one.
Everybody take care.
Bye-bye.